Hello, everyone. This is a short walkthrough of where KushoAI fits inside an enterprise engineering workflow. I'm going to show this to you across three stages: before production, during deployment, and after production. The goal is not to show you every feature, but to show how KushoAI has the ability to turn API context into executable, maintained test infrastructure that developers and QAs alike can actually use. Let's get started. So what I'm going to start with is the pre-production workflow. I'm going to show you how Kusho AI decides what needs to be tested and not just how to generate tests that developers can use. I'm on the main Kusho AI screen right now, and what you can do here is you can start by using the create test suite option. You get multiple ways to give Kusho AI context. For the purpose of this demo, I'm going to use the Open API specification option. Right. So before we move ahead, I just wanted to give you a little bit of context on what we mean by what value Kosho AI adds before people are going in for a deployment. Let's say this is the stage when they're writing code or QA is trying to test a new feature that's being deployed, etc. Right. So let's say before an API reaches production, right, the biggest gap is usually coverage. Developers and QA teams have to read the spec, they have to understand the behavior, they have to think through all the edge cases, they have to write payloads, they have to define assertions, they have to make sure that the suite is actually meaningful. Kusho AI does all of this, but it just does it with significantly more efficiency and makes the whole process seem extremely effortless. Kusho AI starts by understanding the API, then plans coverage across happy paths, negative paths, auth failures, schema issues, edge cases, and workflow failures before generating executable tests. So I'm just going to go ahead and show you exactly how that works. And I'm just going to paste an OpenAPI spec here and show you really quickly what the spec looks like. So if you look at this, it's called Account APIs. It's a bank account management API spec. This is the URL. It helps you create a bank account. So it's a bank account API. Let's look at what fields this API has. So there's an API key, there's a whole header section here. And if we scroll down further, it's got multiple fields. Like, for example, let me just scroll down a little bit more. Yeah, so you have information about the bank account type. So whether it's a salary account, there's multiple enums here. You have the branch information here. You've got customer details like first name, last name, date of birth, social security number, email, phone, address, etc. And you have sample values for all of these, and you have some other information, right? That's a part of this Open API spec. I'm going to go ahead and then process this collection. Kusho identifies what APIs are here, and I'm going to say, let's do the create account API, right? Move forward. What this just did is that it took in information about the API, and Kusho is now going to pass the spec, understand what the API does, what it was meant for, what inputs it takes, what outputs we can expect from it, what boundary conditions does it expect and satisfy, what's the purpose behind this API. It'll simulate scenarios for this, and it's going to write all the tests. Now let's go and see what tests Kusho has written. Now, this is something that's in progress, so I'm just going to pick up a completed version of this. Typically, a spec of this size is going to take maybe a minute or two for Kusho to finish writing. I'm going to go and open the finished spec here, and let's look at the kind of tests Kusho has written. Kusho has written tests for all of the different fields, and it's written a total of 163 tests that we can see here, right, for this API. Now, you can filter them by, let's say, we want to look at just the happy parts, the positive tests. So these are all the positive tests written. There's also negative tests. There are tests for missing fields, null, empty values. There's invalid value tests. There's data type errors. There's overflow errors, etc. And there's a bunch of semantic tests that Kusho has written, right? Now, let's say we want to look at tests of a certain field or a certain type. You can just go ahead and type in SSN here for social security number, and you will see multiple tests written out for that. So let's say test with leading zeros in the social security number, test with alphabetic characters, test with special characters, test with additional digits in the SSN. You get the drift, right? So what Kusho's done is it's understood what a social security number is, what a typical format looks like. It's then thought about different kind of errors that can happen, right, when you have a SSN field in your API, and then simulated those scenarios and written out tests for you, right? And if you go ahead and click on details, you'll see the request body written out here. Scroll down a bit. So this is testing with leading zeros in the SSN. So I'm just going to go down to the SSN, and yeah, there's multiple, set of zeros here right before at the start of the social security number, right? So you can now run this test. You will see that it's passed. You will see the response here. You will see assertions that Kusho's already drafted on the basis of this request and response pair. And then you will see the assertion results on what's happened here, right? So no, I'm not going to go into feature level detail here, but there's a lot of things that you can do that you would expect from a platform that will allow you to create a production ready suite. But this takes you 90% of the way there. And beyond that, if you want to, let's say, change your variables, if you want to edit some of these tests, we've got a chatbot that you can use. So just talk to KushoAI, say that you want a certain kind of test added. Kusho's going to work on that and do that for you. If you want to add product context, something that our users find extremely useful, you add your product documents, you add your engineering diagrams, you add any sort of business requirement documents, anything that is machine readable essentially can be taken in by Kusho, and Kusho is going to add context from there and then write tests for you, which will take care of stuff like product logic, business logic, etc. Right? You can obviously generate reports, define more test data, add your tests from a different format, etc. Bunch of things that can be done here. Along with this, Kusho also generates a security test for you. So let's go into the security tab and see what tests Kusho has written for us. Yeah, so we can see that there's 99 tests written by Kusho here, and these are of the types such as injection attacks, missing authentication, privilege escalation, data leakage, file inclusion, etc. Right? So very similar format. You can run these tests on staging. You can look at the responses. You can see auto-generated assertions. Similar workflow, right, to what we discussed for the functional tests. Now, while this was for individual APIs, Pusha also allows you to do this for entire API workflows, right? So if I go into the end-to-end test suites option, you can just select multiple APIs and then connect them, construct a whole flow here. Kusho also automatically does this for you using multiple different input options, like for example, HAR files, any sort of session recordings, etc., that you might have. Just upload them, and Kusho is going to create this chain for you, generate tests for every single node in this workflow, and then you can run those tests exactly how we did for the individual APIs, right? I'm just going to move forward now, and we're going to talk about how Kusho helps now that we are done with testing an API that's being written or that's being changed. How does it help during deployment? So the main point here is that Kusho becomes a release gate inside an existing CI/CD deployment workflow. So once the test suite is generated, it becomes part of the release workflow, right? So the tests can run inside a customer's existing CI setup. So teams do not need to move into a new execution stack. So when a release breaks expected API behavior, KushoAI blocks the release and gives developers a clear explanation of what failed, what was expected, what actually happened, and thus what needs to be fixed so that the deployment goes through. I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate how that happens. I'm going to demonstrate how this works in an existing customer CI pipeline, right? For this example, we're going to use a GitLab pipeline. Let's say your company has release pipelines which are set up on GitHub, and you've added Kusho AI as one of the mandatory steps as a part of that pipeline, right? So I'm going to go, let's say this is our release pipeline. I'm going to retry the pipeline here, run it so that, it sort of gets triggered again. And yeah, so we've got the pipeline running. Now, let's say this pipeline takes a few minutes to complete. It's going to perform multiple actions that are a part of your release structure, one of which is going to be the Kusho AI gating mechanism. And how that's going to work is I'll go ahead and open up an older job that we had run, which had failed, and show you what exactly failure looks like, right? So yeah, so this is the output that we've gotten from an executed pipeline run, and this failed. Now let's go down and see why this has failed, right? So it says that the pass rate for this was 92%, whereas the required for the next stage pass rate was 95%. So just to explain what's happened here, the customer said that at least 95% of the tests that Kusho AI triggers and runs as a part of the release pipeline for any branch or any code commit that's happening needs to have 95% of the tests passing. And here only 92% of the tests pass. which is why the release got blocked. What that means for us is Kusho AI came in, looked at a deployment, understood what's being changed, triggered the tests for that, executed them, figured out that some of them are failing, showed you exactly why they're failing here, and we'll sort of go into more details about that, and did not let a bad deployment go through. Now, if we scroll up here, we're going to see that all of these are tests that have passed, and we'll look for something that's failed here. So I'm just going to scroll up a little bit more, and I think I see a failed one. Yes. So this is the test that's failed here. So the test with given field missing customer first name is what's failed here. And let's say we want to know why this has failed, right? We, as developers, want to go ahead and fix this so our deployment can go through. There's a link to view detailed test results, and I'm going to go click on it. And we'll see what Kusho tells us about what's failed. Now that we know that there's an error that's blocked our deployment, we want to go and figure out why that error happened. So this is the page where you can see details on why errors have happened. Um, I'm going to scroll down here and look at all the failed tests that we have. Let's go to the one that we just saw, which is the customer first name. And we'll go and view details. And we can see exactly why it failed here. This is the assertion that failed. And it says that the status code was wrong. It should have been 422, but it was 200. So it was a status code error, which is why this failed. So as a developer, this just very quickly tells me what I need to go back and fix so that my deployment can go through and prevent any production issues going forward. Now that we are done with how Kusho AI helps during the deployment process, I want to talk about post production. How do engineering enterprise teams find value using Kusho AI in their post production maintenance stage? So, the real value that they get in that stage is maintaining coverage as APIs change. So, generating a test suite once is useful, right? But enterprise teams struggle because APIs change every sprint and test suites decay. Kusho AI detects what changed, identifies the affected tests, rewrites only the relevant parts of those test suites, and keeps regression coverage current over time. This is why we think of Kusho AI less as a test generation tool and more as test maintenance infrastructure. It helps teams get coverage initially, enforce it during release, and preserve it as the product changes, as things evolve, features evolve, and platforms grow. Right? So I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate how this works in practice. So I'm going to start off with showing how regression suites work on Kusho AI. I'll go ahead and click on regression suites. And how this works is you can essentially run curated groups of tests directly from one place, right? So tests get tagged as sanity tests or regression tests, etc., automatically by default if there's any enterprise rules that you want Kusho to follow, or you can manually set them up. And as and when these regression, and we can just sort of look at, let's say this is a customer account creation critical regression, right? So this is a nightly run that happens, and the latest run 24 passed and 2 tests failed. So if you just click on this, you'll see details when the regression runs happen, how long they ran for, and whether the regression passed or failed. And if you click on them, you'll see more details like we just saw about what failed and why, get exhaustive reports, etc. You can also manually, obviously, trigger them from here and see what happens. And you can also go down, drill down to like a test level and see what failed and why. So while we can set up regression runs, one of the most challenging parts here is ensuring that these test suites remain current as code bases evolve, as APIs change, as this contracts change, right? We have something called the auto update feature, something that allows maintenance on the fly. Users don't really need to worry about updating their test suites, adding tests, or removing them as their APIs change, or rewriting those scripts again. Kusho AI has the ability to do this automatically without any manual involvement. And I'm going to show you how this works. I'll go to the auto update setup option. How this works is it allows you to monitor API specs. Right now, it could be from an open API setup, it could be from Swagger Hub, it could be from Postman, Git, whatever documentation platform that you use today. Kusho AI pulls the latest contract, compares it with existing test suites, and shows you what needs to change, what has already changed, etc. So essentially keeps these test suites up to date without you putting in any manual effort. So you can set it up using this fairly intuitive workflow here. And once that happens, you can look at your list of monitored specs right now here. So this is the list that I have currently. So there's a core banking open API spec that's being monitored. So it pulls every 6 hours to see if the spec has changed. If it does, then it goes and makes changes to that API. Similarly, you can see that you can set up daily schedules every 12 hours, weekly, even shorter, whatever your APIs kind of allow. And whenever you want, you can trigger this manual as well. Now, how do we know if a test suite has changed? If I just go to my test suites, I'm going to see this symbol that tells me that the create account details API has seen a few changes. And if I just click on this, it's going to tell me that API changes were detected. There's a symbol here on the create account details API that tells us that there are updates available for this test suite. So what this means is KushoAI has detected changes in the spec. It's configured some changes that it wants you to take a look at and apply. And if I click on this, I'll see that there's a new field that's been added. So customer middle name was added to the request body. There's another field that's been added, customer annual income. And based on this, Kusho has generated a bunch of new tests. And if I click on apply updates, Kusho is going to go and add all of these tests to the test suite. Now, a lot of our customers, they sort of select this by default. What they want is every time there's a spec change, Kusho automatically goes ahead and adds or remove tests based on whatever the spec change is, right? So that's a configuration that you can sort of opt for depending on specific workspaces or specific APIs that you're working with, right? So yeah, the updates have been applied and we can see the updated test suite here. Now it's got a higher number of tests than what it did before. Yeah, so I think with this, we won't do a feature level review here, but you get a sense of how Kusho AI helps add value in the post-production monitoring setup. So the full workflow is fairly simple. Kusho AI helps teams create high coverage test suites before production, enforce that coverage during the process of deployment, and maintain it after production as APIs evolve. Thank you for watching.